How would you want us to reflect on Pravin Gordhan and his years of service?
Well, I've been an activist from my days at university in 1971 when I was elected to the SRC at what was the University of Indians in Salisbury, Salisbury Island in Durban. And 1972 were two boycotts at the university at the time. One, the big one, which was national and called by SASO, was when Abraham Tiro was ejected from Turfloop University. But yeah, so that's 50 odd years of activism. At the same time, a whole lot of senior people in Durban relaunched the Natal Indian Congress when they realized that although the ANC was banned, the Natal Indian Congress wasn't banned as part of the Congress alliance. And then slowly, over the next couple of years, the Congress flag, the Freedom Charter, and the presence of a Congress movement publicly is what was achieved over that particular period. That led then to mass campaigns by the late 70s, after the 1976 student revolt in Soweto. If you go back and read about 1980 and 1981, you'll find that the country was in real turmoil. There were workers, there was the Wilson Roundtree strike, the Fatties and Moni strike. I learned that Ibrahim Patel, for example, was also retiring, was a young student, and there was massive activity amongst high school students and workers in the Western Cape that spread elsewhere as well. In Durban and elsewhere, there were university boycotts. So you had community things happening, students, workers, and politics all coming together. And then that led to the UDF and taking on the tricameral parliament. So how do I see that path? Well, we learned a lot. We made mistakes along the way and corrected them, fortunately, to some extent, and did our best to make sure that within the ambit of whatever resources one had individually, one was able to contribute to building organizations, to building political consciousness, and leaving behind some legacy of dynamic mobilizing, organizing, and raising of political consciousness, and thinking through issues. Whilst the ANC was outside, we had to find our own way here and create connections. So many of the comrades became members of the underground as well, both of the SACP and of the ANC by the 1970s as well. And that happened throughout the country, so it's not unique to us as well in many ways. So one has done one's best for the country, and one's conscience is very clear on that.
Pravin Gordhan in government, because you speak about the path towards government in essence, but as I speak to you now, you are Pravin Gordhan stepping down from serving in cabinet. You're stepping down from being known as a minister. Your reflections on this period, how do you want us to understand you as somebody who was in parliament, in cabinet?
Looks like I got all the tough jobs. So in 2009, yes. In 2009, when I was first asked by Mr. Zuma to serve in cabinet as finance minister, the effects of the 2008-9 global financial crisis,
the recession period, yes,
was just beginning to come to the shores of South Africa. A couple of months after I joined the Treasury, the officials come to me and say, we will have a 50 billion rand deficit in revenue collections. Fortunately, Mr. Manuel and his team left behind a very good fiscal picture. Low debt, a little bit of surplus on the budget, and we were able to absorb that shock at that time. We even saw some growth subsequently, but after that it sort of leveled off. So one of the big challenges has been, how do you grow our economy on a larger scale but how do you grow it in an inclusive way? And that has remained our challenge, and you can see it in the literature today. Um, the OECD, the IMF have all commented in their analyses of South Africa that we have what they call a very concentrated product market sector, meaning that we have lots of the sectors of our economies which are basically oligopolies, a few big firms operating. Now, in this kind of context, you have the flip side of the coin is too few small businesses, too few medium-sized businesses, because apartheid didn't allow that to happen. And we inherited that. And that remains as the major challenge going forward, because the premise is accepted that if you want to create jobs, the jobs are created in that sector, not in the big business sector.
It's the small and the
So
mediums,
that's the first period. And that was also at a time when, if retrospectively, state capture was beginning to creep in. Because a person like Barbara Hogan, for example, was fired as the Minister of Public Enterprises because she thought a candidate for the CEO position of Transnet was not acceptable, and there might have been other issues that I'm not aware of, and replaced by Malusi Gigaba at the time. I don't know what was going on because we only found out much later about the fact that the same people were sitting here because this was the site from which state capture operated. 2014, I moved to Kokta, and local government was also facing many crises.
Continues to do so to date.
Yeah, so we developed a program with the officials and amongst ourselves called the Back to Basics program. Do 5 things properly in every municipality: cut grass, make the robots work, etc., cover the potholes, and your city or town will start changing. But I think I spent 18 months there, and the whole idea at 2014 was to get me out of finance, because I'm sure the Guptas had dictated that. In December, you have the unfortunate dismissal of Mr. Nene. I think it's the 9th of December at 6 o'clock in the evening. You have the weekend special.
Desmond Royan, who's now a member of the MK party.
And the markets go into a tiz. So yes, politics in the market, right? And how do you manage them? So it's not, markets just don't dictate. There's a dynamic interaction between politics and the markets. And the question is, how do you manage that dynamic? Then there's I know a flurry of activity taking place amongst key business people, some of the ANC senior people, and somewhere between 6 and 7 in the evening on the 13th of December 2015, I get a message, come up, the president wants to see you, and I go up. I had a bit of a hint as to what he might do. I also had phone calls which say yes. I don't know what I was supposed to say yes to.
You were told to say yes, yeah.
So I sat with the president at the time, says, I want you to take this job. I said, why? I'm enjoying local government. And I truly was. And you have other options. You have Jabu Moleketi, who was Deputy Minister of Finance. You had BC Jonas, who was also Deputy Minister of Finance. And both of them have good records. Choose one of them. He gave me some excuse as to why that was not right. I then said I'd like to consult my family. I made a phone call and then had to agree and then helped to write a statement which was issued that night. Nothing happened to the markets on Monday morning. And we had a press conference, I think, at 10 o'clock that morning to answer questions like the nuclear one and many others.
Oh yes, the nuclear period.
As well. And so started the next leg of finance and the Guptas and Zuma. Because 2016, right from the beginning, I get a visit from General Intlemeza, who says, I just want to tell you I'm running 2 investigations in your entities. 10 minutes and he's gone. The next thing, in January or early February 2016, he insists he's got a document to deliver. This is shortly before the budget. And 2 or 3 weeks before the budget, we are very intensely involved in, as you will know, completing budget documentation, etc. And I'm just walking in. The officials have already done a whole lot of work. And he keeps insisting he wants to deliver this document. I get Mr. Jonas to speak to him. And he sort of says, okay, but the next thing the document pitches up before the budget, and that's the 27 questions. So I go and see the president and say, what's this? I thought I was supposed to be killed during the apartheid years, not in a democratic era. What's this kind of thing happening? No answer. But that was the beginning of 15 months of hell.
This ended up with you being recalled on I think you were on a tour in the States.
That's March 2017.
Yeah, in the lead up to the Nazareth conference, yeah.
Yeah, just as the plane, SAA plane, which doesn't go to London anymore.
Because there's also that issue, yes.
It lands on the tarmac of Heathrow Airport. I put my phone on, and here's a message from Director General Lubisi. I've still got it on my phone, which says, by order of His Excellency the President, you, the Deputy Minister, and the Director General are instructed to return to South Africa immediately. Of course, you can't return immediately. There's no flights going back until that night. And secondly, the Deputy Minister wasn't outside the country. He was still in the country. And then thirdly, we had commitments to meet rating agencies and investors. And that was also a time when you had the CEO movement or initiative, where CEOs were involved, the trade unions were involved, and we took them along on these investment shows for the first time. And Lungisa, Fuzila and I went to the hotel, we changed, and we held a full range of meetings, at least 2 ratings agencies and some investors, and then made our way back to Heathrow Airport and landed. And went to see the then Secretary General, Mr. Mantash. What's going on? And what is all this about? But we knew there was some fake, once again.
Oh yes, there was a report, yes, an intelligence report.
Which nobody bought into. And then they agree on a formulation which says there's a breakdown of relationship. But I'm not his employee, I'm a political appointee. So that language is normally used in a normal employment situation. But so be it, a number of ministers were fired. Hanekom, Ramat Lodi, myself, and I think a few others.
Bladen Zimande was also let go at that time, that fallen out of grace, out of favor. Then eventually you did find your way back under different presidents, back into government.
Oh, but I stayed in Parliament.
Oh yes, you stayed in Parliament. Yes, that committee that was looking into ESCOM. Now I remember. I have bits and pieces that I remember. But just to try and fast track that conversation though, you did find your way back into government where you are now at Public Enterprises.
So again, a terrible job. Because when do I walk into public enterprises? When all the disclosures about state capture have happened, when the Zondo Commission is about to sit, I think a little bit later, and the Gupta email leaks had already happened, the linkages were known, the key actors were known up to a point, because I think there were many hidden actors as well. And we then had to assess what's going on. in the SOEs we were responsible for, all of them had rotten boards. All of them had something taken from them. In the case of Transnet, it's a 1064 locomotive deal, wrong deals on cranes, movement of money from capital rather maintenance to capital so that it could be spent on these projects. Eskom, of course, was infamous for coal contracts and all sorts of deals. Transnet also on the property side. Denel lost its intellectual property and skills, and all sorts of funny things happened there.
issue.
SAA had to deal with it in finance under the chairperson of Ms. Mieni.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and that has been in decline for a decade or more by that time.
The expectation, I know I wanted legacy, but the expectation around you taking over, particularly coming to public enterprises, was that these SOEs that have been at the heart really of state capture, you would arrive and start undoing the effects and the impacts of state capture on these departments. Some are of the belief, as we speak, you and I now, that actually they've continued to depreciate on your watch, that the turnaround that many were hoping for has not been quite achieved as yet. What would be your response to that?
No, that's a very inadequate understanding of the dynamics of recapturing an institution. And not enough people spend time to think about or write about or speak about or report on the intricacies of what is involved in these processes. So we all thought during 2018, part of 2019, that if you change the boards of the SOEs, you've done your job. So we changed all the boards, right, and put good people there. Secondly, if you have proper management teams, you'll also, well, firstly, get rid of the old senior people and those who are implicated. And some of the boards, like in Transnet under Popo Molefe, and to an extent under Jabu Mabuza in Eskom as well, there was quite a significant clean out of people who were implicated in state capture. But many moles still remain in these institutions who are still engaging in tender fraud, doing business with the SOEs under their wives' names, daughters' names, sons' names, etc. Their days will come to an end soon. We'll wait and see. But then we realized that this damage is quite significant. So the governance aspects, that's board and management, is just one element. Once you damage that area, the next element that is damaged is you take the focus away from operations. So your operations decline. And if your operations decline, then your revenue declines. So then you get into balance sheet and debt problems. If your revenue and operations are not working, then your business model must change. And obviously you're
And
not...
that's what we're seeing as the public.
That's what you see as the public.
Continued decline, and that's what concerns us, yes.
Yeah, but you got to understand this value chain.
I'm hearing you.
Right? And if you don't fix these things, some of them have a long history, some of them had a short history. So in 1998, there was a white paper on energy which said that by the early 2000s or 2007, you're going to run out of energy or you'll be inadequate in terms of provision. But somebody made a decision not to build power stations then. And then when the realization hit, we do Medupi and Kusile. And that's when the rot sets in as well, because tens of billions of rands of overstatements and underhand contracts and so on, which are still in the news in one form or another. If you look at today's newspapers, all of that actually happened as well. So state capture or recapturing the state capture institutions has taken time. But what is interesting is that right as we are sitting now, there's a conference going on in Dubai, hosted by Standard Bank. I'm just getting some feedback from one or two of my officials that are there. And I can read it to you a little bit later, but here's the chief economist of the Standard Bank saying that the turnaround is noticeable. The impact of the reforms that we are undertaking, both at Eskom and Transnet, are working, and the signs are moving in the right direction. So yes, there's a lot more work to do, but I think we've begun to turn the corner. In Transnet, you have a Transnet recovery plan, but you don't have enough cash at the moment. And what that earlier period did is that it didn't maintain or buy new cranes in time. So we say this port is not working, but it doesn't have enough equipment. Right? So, for example, for the last, say, year, 9 months, the Transnet management has been looking for second-hand equipment, second-hand cranes. So 7 of them arrived in Cape Town in December last year, just as an example. From where? Los Angeles. So they're scraping around the world, because you can't order a crane today and expect it to be delivered tomorrow. Secondly, maintenance on the main rail corridors has not been done for a while, the proper maintenance. And that begins to impact on the speed with which trains can travel and the efficiency with which the load factors can be carried as well. So as you have problems, you have less volumes being carried. So particularly if you look at the Durban-Gauteng linkage, the container corridor, what they call the NATCO, it has bends and so on where you have to slow your train down and take curves and so on. But then all of that got complicated by the floods in 2022 because there was huge damage in KZN in particular. And one of the major, we were just told the other day, sometimes you'll see a gap between just two railway lines hanging and 50 meters, 70 meters down, nothing. So you've got to start constructing a whole foundation to hold up that railway track. But you've also had people coming too close and building houses close to the railway tracks as well. So you've got to start helping people to move away in some instances.
Do you have any regrets about how you've handled that issue of Eskom and the outputs and?
Yeah, I think there's no regrets, but we should have been more observant about what a person like Andre de Ruyter was up to, where too much of the focus was on renewables and traveling around the world and selling that, and not enough courage to tackle some of the problems that have more recently been tackled. And obviously a book was written at the same time as being managed, at the same time as managing Eskom, including what kind of samosas he had at my humble house. But with that kind of management, it shows that the focus was wrong. We gave him too much of a lead time, or rather lag, or a leash. But then some of these things you don't recognize at the moment. I'm not an engineer. I've learned a lot. I can ask you questions. I'll be able to pick up when you are talking nonsense to me. But ultimately, it's they that have to do the job. And there's no doubt the climate that was created by state capture is very toxic, because you have a whole range of syndicates that are operating. And we haven't done well enough, although we are coming to terms with it now in some ways, on the law enforcement side and putting people into orange uniforms. Because if you don't show that the state has the capacity to lock you up when you do these sorts of things, then you begin to develop impunity and say, I can do anything, I can get away, because nobody can catch me, neither the investigators nor the prosecutors.
And the public deserves, can never say this enough times, the public deserves people in orange overalls, particularly in my perspective. The seniors in government, politicians in government, Nomvula Mokoyani once upon a time said to me, you had made Andre Director the alpha and omega of ESCOM, that you had protected, defended them in essence as they were raising concerns about load shedding. I listened to what you say now, and it's very much actually in line with what you said. At the time, the ANC had suffered a loss as far as the metros were concerned. It was coming from the 2021 elections, where local government elections, where the NC felt that ESCOM was behaving as an opponent to the governing NC at the time. Your reaction to those kind of comments from people again within the ANC? Nomvula Mokayane spoke to this particular podcast in making those comments.
Yeah, I think it's, again, I don't engage in personalities and personality attacks and so on, firstly. Secondly, I think she also has my telephone number. And thirdly, we, either as a political organization or as government, usually wake up at the last minute, and when we want the votes, we want to solve these problems overnight. But fourthly, I have sufficient evidence that we have intervened with ESCOM in a number of areas throughout the country where there were non-functional transformers, or transformers that were overloaded through illegal connections, and which were at a reasonable cost to ESCOM, 2 or 3 million rands each, replaced. And there's a long list of them. But the challenge we have, as Joburg has spelled it out over this weekend, is we have to have the courage to go to our people and say, stop the illegal connections, right? Minimize the amount of electricity that you're using in that kind of way. We've driven around Gauteng. I've seen the thing myself. Some of it is very dangerous. But there are also, I think, possibly technicians at a lower level from ESCOM who are benefiting from these schemes as well, so we are told. But yeah, there are lots of other problems where big business or businesses like shopping centers and so on have doctored their meters in a way in which they don't pay their full due to a municipality, and I'm hearing this more and more often as I move around. But that's a separate matter. But you see, one should not be using, whether it's a podcast or anything else, to attack a comrade who's not in the position to respond on the podcast. And if you have a complaint, like I said, pick up the phone, because you're supposed to be a member of the same organization. So one then has to ask, what's the motive for some of these things? Now, I can also say many things that have been said by certain people, but I'm not going to go there.
I'll take that. Professor Malakapuru Makhoba is another one who's highly critical of what your leadership was like when he was serving on the board of ESCOM. Meddlesome, some of the words he used, micromanaging them. Your reaction to also that kind of response to your attempts to work together with the board at the time to resolve the issues of load shedding, of the energy shortage?
Yeah, I've got my full set of spanners in the room on that side. How can I meddle in a power station? I know nothing about it. Right? That's number one. But I suppose when I write my book, I'll have a few things to say about Professor Makhoba and his stint during the chairpersonship of ESCOM. But right now, let's leave it where it is. Because again, what is the necessity to attack a minister in that kind of form? I phoned him when I heard about this. He said, no, read the book. You'll find what I have to say. But in my interactions with him during his stint, we had mutual respect. We had the necessary cooperation. And in some ways, the board was less than adequate in dealing with the issues. But remember, the board is the accounting authority. When you talk about those periods of load shedding, it should be me rushing. It should be the board doing that. And in particular, the chairperson of the board doing some of that work. But I'm an activist, you see. So without overstepping my mark, I don't go and give instructions. I ask questions. And if you can't answer them, then that's your problem, not mine. But at least I am able to report to senior people within government. I've been there, I've seen this. These are the facts as I see them now. Tomorrow morning, if they change, I'll tell you that they've changed. That's my responsibility.
The appointment of Dr. Hossein Toramogopa Sputla, was it a surprise to you as well as it was for others?
I was informed about it.
You're informed. And how well did you work with him? Because at some point, he felt caught between you and Minerals Minister Gordhan. And I would laugh at him and say, shame, you look like you're caught between two bulls. Maybe I was wrong in my reading, but I highly doubt I was wrong.
Yeah, but I'm not a bull, you see. At least Mantashe owns some bulls. I don't. I grew up in an urban area, and I don't have a farm. He's got a farm.
He does. He does.
Minister Ramakopa has found his way, done his bit. Now let's see what the next administration has to do.
Were people who suggested you were the Prime Minister? Do I even ask my question after that? What was that about, though? And these are people from these conversations, these ideas, these suggestions do come from the political party you serve, saying he's all powerful. He cannot.
Didn't start inside the ANC.
But it's carried in the ANC.
Yeah, no. Well, there are different, and I'm sure with your own experience, there are people who would call themselves political activists or politicians, but who will fall on different scales in terms of their maturity, their political understanding, their political etiquette, and their political discipline, and the kind of political culture that they grew up in, and the way in which they would actually behave. So maligning, I'm fairly creative. I can develop all sorts of nomenclatures for colleagues as well. But that's not my main business here. My main business is to do my work. If you want to malign me, go ahead, have some fun. Doesn't worry me at all. I don't lose any sleep over it because I know it's nonsense.
Let's speak a little bit about the EFF. The EFF's attitude towards you has been largely criticized, including, I think there was a time where they attempted to confront you when you're speaking in Parliament. What do you think that was owed to? Do you link that to periods where there was an issue around sequestration with Julius Malema? Do you link that to the on-point engineering corruption claims, and whether or not it was because they viewed you as somebody who was an ally of former President Jacob Zuma? What do you think that was about?
No idea, but I believe its origins might be something that happened in SARS, which I don't know about.
The sequestration issue around Julius Malema?
I don't know the details. And even if I knew the details, I'm bound by confidentiality, unlike some people's ethics, you see. But the second thing, which we cannot deny, is that his comments have always been racist, and that he's extended his attacks not only to me, but to the Indian community
at some point.
And that is totally unacceptable. Our constitution talks about building a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. If you sit in the Parliament of South Africa and you swear an oath of allegiance to the constitution, your behavior must be consistent with that. And of course, there's been social media activity. My daughter's got an account in Canada. It didn't exist. There were a whole lot of other claims that were made, and they were all lies. Right? But social media being what it is, and sometimes journalists being what they are, they perpetuate these things as well. But I've got no time for racism, no time for division creating in our society, and no time for personal attacks. If you want to talk to me, come and sit down and talk. If you want to talk about a difference that we have, and if you can't settle it, then let's agree to disagree. That's what civilized people do. They don't engage in these kinds of populist nonsense. That's why you got less than 10% of the vote.
Were you surprised that there seemed to be attempts to pin something on you over the years? Because that wasn't actually the first, nor was the EFF the only party that felt that they needed to find something
They
to
can keep
pin on
looking.
Pravin.
They can keep looking. They'll find nothing. Simple.
What does that suggest? That you're that good or that you're that clean? Because those are two different things. If you say people can keep looking, they'll find nothing. One will go,
I have not stolen, as I've said this a million times, I have not stolen a single cent from the public purse.
as
Right?
you.
And I have never engaged in any corrupt activity. So to even ask that question in this podcast is offensive. It's my turn now.
No, go,
It's my turn now. I
go,
find it
go ahead. It's
extremely
okay.
offensive.
Sure.
No, because my record is there. If you don't want to believe it, that's a different matter. But there are clean people in this country. They're not all dirty. And those clean people are the people that must wake up now and fight the dirty people. That's what fighting state capture and corruption is about. You must have a conscience, but you've got to have a sense of ethics and integrity as well.
It's very difficult, and you can't blame anyone in this country for believing having lesser and lesser belief in politicians or people in the
That's what I
political
said right at the
space.
beginning. I'm
You
not
can
a
say you're
politician.
you can say you're a
No,
political activist,
I'm sorry.
but you are in that space. You are in that space.
No, but they are honest politicians as well. Don't malign all of them.
I've never met an honest politician.
Then
that's
I
on
must
me.
take you around.
Please do.
Yeah, find the
Please
time,
do.
get an expense account, and let's go.
Please do. As you step down from public office, we have a Tom Moyane resurfacing, and Nathi Nhleko resurfacing. Former President Jacob Zuma has also resurfaced. Your sense of what that means and how we should, again, understand what that means for the country. When you watch that, what comes to mind?
It's a dangerous time. It's a dangerous time. Do people want to take us back to state capture? Haven't we learned as a country yet? The kind of damage that has been caused, the kind of time it takes to recover, and we haven't recovered yet. And what does it mean when you have as your agenda the decimation of democratic institutions that so much of energy has been spent on? Read the 1993 interim constitution and its contents and the efforts that were put into it. Read the process by which Mr. Mandela and others led us. Mr. Mandela from prison, the underground in South Africa, Oliver Tambo and his associates from outside, Thabo Mbeki, Mac Maharaj and Operation Vula, and how all of them come together to bring us to democracy and the negotiations that actually took place at the World Trade Center. You want to come and destroy all that now? After all the sacrifices, not those individuals have only made, but the people of South Africa have made. People who were removed, people who were victims of the Group Areas Act, who were settled in Dimbaza and Lime Hill, killed in the mines and everywhere else. We have no respect for all those sacrifices in building the kind of democracy that we have today. What gives you the right to come along and resurface some of these people so that they can go back to the same institutions and destroy them again?
Over 2 million people voted for that party. Over 2 million people have given the nod to that organization. Doesn't that say something?
No, you've got to also, as a good journalist, go a few feet down to the ground, because I've been doing it, and ask the question, what were they told? What were they told? So we'll see. It's a young party. It's a young party. It's already fraying, right? How many court actions are there already?
A fair amount.
Right. It's already fraying at the edges. But that's not for me to comment on. Let's watch. History will take its course.
And President Cyril Ramaphosa, you continue to believe in him, you have confidence in his leadership and his ability to steer the country through these current waters and whatever we're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, he steered us through COVID, he steered us through all sorts of, through the 2021 violence, through the 2022 floods, and all sorts of international crises.
Mm.
And I think he stands heads and shoulders above many statesmen across the world, and is recognized for that.
My parting shot. What do we not understand still about Pravin Gordhan? What have we continued to misunderstand that we need to try and understand a little bit better?
No, I'm just a humble guy who grew up in the middle of Durban in the so-called Grey Street area. Was fortunate enough to meet some politicos early in his life, and overcame my fear at each stage as we progressed through the struggle, and made the contributions that I've made. So nothing has to be really known. Safe to say, I know I've done a good piece of work.